Hey everybody, Roy Rogers here from The White Book and Second Sons. And today I have a video that's going to take a look at how to beat Targaryen. At the end of my last video, which was about combo, OTK combo in particular, I said that you should play combo. If you are like what seems like half this community, waking up every night with cold sweats, thinking about how combo is ruining the game, or if you just can't even walk into a game night kit, much less Euros or Kubla Khan or one of the regionals that are coming up this summer, without just being so scared of combo, Targaryen, I think, is a relatively safe bet against combo. So you can look at the arguments for that in that last video. You can actually look at some really good discussion about the ins and outs, the mathematical possibilities of Targ beating, particularly Hyper Viper combo, in the comments of that video. So I would definitely suggest checking that out. But today, since I recommended that you should play Targaryen in my last video, I thought I would follow it up with a how to beat Targaryen video. So I'm doing this for a couple reasons. One is the first one I laid out, that I think Targ is really strong against combo, which is the top deck in the field, and I think it's just generally good against the field. I think Targ remains one of the strongest factions. I think the other reason that I want to do this video, or I know the other reason I want to do this video would be a better way to structure that sentence, is that I think Targ is actually kind of a sleeper. I think in the fourth cycle meta, people have been way more upset and way more focused on, obviously, Tyrell, with Tyrell combo being, of course, the most talked about deck ever. And, of course, but also Mace decks. And as a big fan of Mace decks, I appreciate the discussion that's going on about it. And also, Greyjoy. Asha Greyjoy, I think, is the flashiest card, one of the flashiest cards in the entire fourth cycle. And people, I mean, that experience of losing to Euron and losing to Asha and losing to Balon is just like really not fun. So I can definitely see why people have to really just hit on those two factions as being the best. But I think Targ, because it got one of the sweetest cards, I mean, everyone agrees that the new Danny is one of the sweetest cards, but because it got one of the sweetest cards, but also just because it has one of the strongest card pools, perhaps the strongest, but it's up there with other ones that have amazing card pools like Tyrell and Greyjoy. It's just a really good faction, and you should know how to beat it. You should know how to beat sort of a general good stuff Targ deck. So what I did is I went in and tweaked, I could have made worse, but I tweaked Adam Geeks. So Adam, again, he is the 2017 Canadian National Champion. He did really well at Worlds. I talked about his deck list, his totally untweaked deck list at the end of my last episode. But to sort of give you a better sense of Targ in general, I moved a few cards around here to give you a general sense of what I think a good competitive Targ deck is in the current meta. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over this deck list. We're going to talk about how it plays, the basic strategies of Targaryen. Then I'm going to give you a bunch of basic strategies that beat Targaryen, beat both this deck and beat Targaryen in general. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to come around and give you a deck list that I think, a published deck list that I think is really, really strong in general against Targ. And maybe I'll do a future video about how to beat that deck. So yeah, so let's get to it. And so let's start with the fact that there's basically two strategies for Targaryen. The first one I'd like to call is blow you out. And this is like the most classic Targ thing since the core set, since the first cycle. And it really comes around to this single card that is a core set card, and that's Khal Drogo. So Khal Drogo is the 6 cost, 5 strength, military power. So he's Bicon, renown. And he has this passive text. You may initiate an additional military challenge during the challenges phase. All right, so what this means is if you can get Khal Drogo out on the first turn, particularly using plots like trading with the Pentoshi, or even Calm over Westeros if your econ base is strong on the start, you can really blow people out. Khal Drogo and another military icon like Rhaegal or Viscera or Strong Belwas or Quotho, and we'll get to Quotho in a second, is really, really strong because not every deck can survive two sizable military challenges coming out on the first turn. So some Targ decks can literally win plot 1. And this is helped along with one of the highest variance cards in the game, and you can go way back to the very first Full Worlds, the one that Joe Miranda won, and look at the power of this card, because it's what knocked Ryan Jones out of the top 4 and out of the ability to make the final table, which is this card right here, Crown of Gold. This 4-cost terminal attachment. Attached character gains a king trait, which you think would be sweet in the current meta, but it's not. Attached character gets -4 strength and is killed if its strength is 0. So that lets you, so say your opponent sets up a Tyrion, sets up a Mel, or plays Mel on the first turn and you're going second, you can just, boom, their strategy is dead. Now, this is a little less swingy than it was early on, but it still can be super duper swingy on the first turn. Hitting like a Marjorie, both Marjories, because, or hitting a Mace and then going into Blood of the Dragon on turn 2. So a first turn Mace. First turn, small Marjorie, she just dies. Big Marjorie, or people like to call her Tinder Marge. So Crown of Gold turn 1 into Blood of the Dragon turn 2. Boom, that's dead, and that's really going to thin their board. So those two cards, those sort of old school cards of sort of blow you out on the first turn, are, so there's a dog in the background, are really good at blowing people out on the first turn. And this has been supplemented by a couple of cards. One, which is relatively old at this point, came out this time last year, which is Plaza of Pride. This, of course, is probably one of the most powerful Targaryen cards in general. It's a location, costs 1. It has action, kneel Plaza of Pride, and discard a card from your hand, and stand a character with printed cost X or lower. X is 3 higher than the printed cost of the discarded card. So that lets you do things like stand Khal Drogo on the first turn, so he can do 2 5-strength military challenges, which a lot of factions cannot survive on the first turn. It works really well with other big dudes that are pretty cheap with Khal Drogo. So if you can get Khal Drogo, Plaza of Pride, and a Second Sons going, well, that's going to be a lot on the first turn for people to hit on, right? And it seeds your discard pile for these Second Sons, which we'll get to in a second. And it was also supplemented by this card, Quotho, who allows your opponent to say, okay, I know I can beat 1 5-strength military challenge. There's no Plaza of Pride in play, so I know that there's only Khal Drogo. I can block Khal Drogo, or I can lose my Khal Drogo, the Khal Drogo challenge, and win the challenge that on the board they're going to use with Viscera or Rhaegal. Well, what you can do first turn is you do your challenge with Khal Drogo. The opponent loses it. Okay, that's cool. Got my claim, and then you go Quotho. And Quotho is so strong because he has an action. He's a 5-strength Bicon military intrigue. Action, discard 2 Targaryen cards from your hand, put Quotho into play from your hand. That's really strong. And that can blow people out. I've seen that play done against me. I've done that play against people, both on Iron Throne and in real life. Quotho combined with Khal Drogo, the fact that you can easily, on the first turn, get 2 5-strength military icons out, and that usually is enough to overwhelm a lot of people. That's 2 claim going into things like Blood of the Dragon the next turn to thin out any small dudes that they have, or going to March to the Wall to get rid of the 1 character they still have left, is just, or even Valor to get rid of that amazing character, the amazing characters that they had to pull dupes off on the next turn. That a lot of decks can't recover from that, and it's just sort of you can literally win pretty consistently with Targaryen, not super consistently, but pretty consistently on the first turn. And that's one of the most frustrating things about Targ. The other thing that Targaryen can do is the second strategy, which is I call burn them all. So if the first strategy is blow them out, the second strategy is burn them all. And these are not mutually incompatible strategies. And this one involves this card, Dracarys. Drac. John Bruno's favorite way that I like to pronounce this card. Drac is a great event. It costs 1 action, kneel a dragon character or Daenerys Targaryen. We'll get to her in a minute. To choose a participating character until end of the phase, that character gets -4 strength and is killed if its strength is 0. Very strong. And of course, we're running the full dragon package of Drogon, Viscera, and Rhaegal, and we've got 3 Dannys, and we'll come back to her in a second. This basically means any character in a challenge, you can kill almost all good characters, all right, with just a single gold and a kneel for one of their dragons or for Dany. You also have Dragon is no slave, which can also be either compared with Dracarys, so if they're 5 strength attack, Dracarys it, Dragon is no slave, or combined with Daenerys. And because Daenerys is really just busted, because Daenerys, she's 5 cost, 3 strength, intrigue, power. Her strength cannot be reduced by card effects. And then what really matters, though, at the end of the day, although that can't be reduced by card effects, is really great in the mirror, is reaction. After you play a Targaryen event, choose a character. Until end of the phase, that character gets -1 strength and is killed if its strength is 0. Limit 3 times per round. So that basically means that your Dracarys is 5. And your Dragon is no slave is 3 now with a terminal. And the great thing about Dragon is no slave combined with Dany is the character doesn't have to be in a challenge. So if you can get Dany going on the first turn, on the second turn, you can do Dragon is no slave, get their best 3 strength character, dead. Dracarys, get their best character that should be going in challenges, up to 5 strength, so that hits things like Mace, hits things like your opponent's Khal Drogo, or basically almost every good character can be killed by a Dracarys and Dany. And many very good utility to fantastic characters can be killed with a Dragon is no slave and Dany. So the burn them all strategy is really, really strong. Because, and it can be related, because you can also combine it with a Crown of Gold in the marshalling phase, and then a Dany burn. Like, there's so many crazy things. So you can do, like, Crown of Gold on their best 5 strength character with Dany out, then go into the challenges phase. Dragon is no slave, their second best character. It dies, trigger Dany, and then hit their 5 strength character that got Crown of Gold. So that's really, really, really strong. Now, this strategy is also supplemented by a third thing Targaryen does really well, which is play with discard Flea Bottom. Because a lot of really powerful effects for Targaryen require you to discard cards. Adam's list wasn't running Consuming Flames, but that is another burn card that's in many ways between Dracarys and between Dragon is no slave, because it hits 3 strength characters, gets -3. It has a terminal effect, but you have to discard 2 cards. But let's look at this. So we have Quotho, part of the blow them out strategy. You have to discard 2 cards from your hand. You also have, where is it? You also have, there it is, Plaza of Pride, which causes you to discard cards to stand characters. You also have Second Sons, which discards itself. It has the forced interrupt. When the challenges phase ends, sacrifice Second Sons unless you discard 1 gold from it. So that is really strong discard pile synergy, because Flea Bottom, with its action, challenges. Pay 1 gold and kneel Flea Bottom to put a character with printed cost 3 or lower into play from your discard pile at the end of the phase. If that card is still in play, place at the bottom of the deck. This basically, Flea Bottom, lets you turn your discard pile into a second hand. So any of your 3-cost characters, which in this deck there are 3 cost or lower. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's plenty. I'm not even going to finish counting. They're saying more than half the deck. Probably close to 2/3 of the character base in Adam's build is printed cost 3 or lower. So that means that literally anything that ends up in your discard pile through, again, the discard of Plaza of Pride, or through Quotho, or just through Intrigue Claim, you have access to those cards. And also with Dany, cards that are kind of marginal before, like Stormcrows, which has a bestow ability. And remember, you can bestow when they come out of the discard pile. Discard X gold from Stormcrows to choose X characters. Until the end of the phase, each of those characters' strength is -1. You can do that with Dany, with your burn, and there's just, as you can see from all of this, there's just really powerful synergies that really, really build up. And that's not even including the access to the plot deck. And what makes Targ Wars to Come, which lets you run 10 instead of 7 plots and up to 2 different copies of plot cards in your plot deck, there's just some really powerful plots that synergize with this. So there's Blood of the Dragon, which creates a terminal effect for each non-dragon character, so they get -1 strength and are killed if their strength is 0. You've got Counting Coppers, which lets you draw 3 cards and refill your hand after discarding your entire hand to Quotho or Plaza of Pride. Lots of stuff. March to the Wall, which lets you, once you've reduced your opponent's board down to 1 or 2 characters, you can clear it out. It's got Valor Margulis, which once you've cleared dupes off your opponent's important characters, you can clear them out. And this is just really, really strong. It lets you run all of these strong effects, Wars to Come, with clutch cards, like powerful econ, like trading with the Pentoshi, trade routes, and then some good answer cards. Oh, and Calm Over Westeros, which is a good opener if your hand is a little slow or if a person is going really fast. So this is a good answer in this deck. For like a rush deck, you can sort of take a turn where you don't have to worry about power claim, or just if you have an awkward start at the beginning and you need to prevent military claim. Because what Calm Over Westeros does is you name a challenge type until you reveal a new plot card, reduce the claim value on the attacking player's revealed plot card by 1 during challenges of that type in which you are the defending player. So you can say military challenge, you don't owe military claim. You can say power challenge or even intrigue challenges. Very powerful. Particularly as an opener or as a way to slow down really fast decks. And of course, King in the North, which Jakob Holtman's plot, which we talked a little bit about last time in my combo video, it, while player does not control a king character, he or she cannot trigger abilities on characters, locations, or attachments. Very, very strong. Well, Targ doesn't have any kings, right? That's not true. There is a Viscera Targaryen. Not this one. This is the good Viscera. Interrupt when Viscera Targaryen leaves play. Choose an attachment, discard it from play, which lets you do things like take Frosos off your frozen solids, which blank locations, off your flea bottoms, off your Astapor. And Astapor is another really great burn them all card because Kneel Astapor, it's a bestow 4, so it can go up to 4 gold. Kneel Astapor and choose a participating character until the end of the challenge. That character gets -X strength. X is the number of gold Astapor has. So with Blood of the Dragon, it can become a -5. With Dany and a Dragon is no slave, it can hit like anything, much less a Dracarys. It's a ridiculous. Astapor is ridiculously powerful with the new Daenerys as well. Anyway, all of these cards are just sweet Froso, frozen solid targets. Like Bannerwolf players live to put Frosos on these cards. So you can use this Viscera to get rid of those Frosos. But there is one that has a king, but he's not very good. You instead, if you're a Targ player, want to run Beggar King, and because Beggar King helps smooth out your economy. Beggar King says, Targaryen character only, attached character gains the king trait, so you can give Dany the king trait. She could be a king and a queen. Reaction, after opponent reveals a plot card with a higher printed gold value than yours, kneel Beggar King to gain 1 gold, 2 gold instead if no opponent controls a king character. So that gives your King in the North the ability to offensively use King in the North. And this, of course, prevents your opponent from triggering a whole variety of effects. It's super strong against Martell. It's super strong against Night's Watch. It's just a super strong card in general. And Beggar King also gives you access to protection from your opponent's King in the North, which, of course, would shut down Dany. It doesn't shut down Khal Drogo because he's a passive text, right? There's no black bolded text there, but it would shut down Dany, it would shut down the flea bottom. All of that is now protected because of this nice, sweet attachment that also smooths out your economy. It makes cards like what Adam's running here, Ghost of Harrenhal, which puts the top character of each player's dead pile into play. And Ghost of Harrenhal is really good if something bad happens to Dany, something bad happens to Khal Drogo early, or you have to Valor, so you're going for the blow them out strategy, and you go to you have to Valor your Khal Drogo away. Well, then you go into next turn, Ghost of Harrenhal, Khal Drogo comes back out. Anyway, that becomes 4 gold. That becomes 4 gold. It's just really strong, or 3 gold. if you're 3 or 4, because these days there are more kings, so I'm more used to playing older Targaryen where almost nobody had kings except Renly, and you were getting 4. But it's so 3 to 4 gold turns these into 3 to 4 gold plots, which is so much better. And this is just scratching the surface of what Targ is capable of, particularly with this new card, which I sort of put in here. It may not fit 100% in Adam's build, but I just wanted to talk little bit about it. To go forward, you must go back. It's a 2-cost event. Prophecy, cool. One of my favorite, actually, parts of the book. But anyway, dominance action. Each player may shuffle his or her hand of at least 1 card into his or her deck to draw 5 cards. This, of course, lets you discard yourself down to 1 card and draw back up to 5 for the cost of 2 gold, and theoretically killing one of their chuds with Danny because it's a Targ event. So Targ got a whole bunch of sweet cards in this set, got a whole bunch of sweet cards over the last several sets. So Targaryen is really strong. So I mean, I could talk much longer about all the synergies, but I hope I went through a lot of the basic synergies, like hardcore Targ loyalists like Alejandro and Sandy will obviously give me a hard time about synergies I missed, but I wanted to give listeners and viewers and readers a great sense of sort of how Targ plays. But I've come up with a bunch of strategies, general strategies, that almost every faction can employ to beat Targ. So we have gone through the basics of how a Targ deck works. Let's take a look at four strategies, not 8, four strategies to beat Targaryen. They are play Targ yourself, make them have it, screw with their discard pile, good positive attachments, and we'll get to the important part of good positive attachments, and take the game long, stretch the game out. And I'm going to talk a little bit in general about all of them. So first, let's talk with the play Targ. So there's actually a really insightful point that my Second Sons co-host Cindy Barnabas made on the last Second Sons about there being a carrying capacity for Targ. Because if you've tested a lot of Targ, and definitely I have, particularly last year, because my team for Gen Con last year, my team, Aaron Glazer, Scott Levine, Jonathan Andrews, Dark Naj, and a bunch of other New York players, and Luke Wortley when Luke was still playing, we also built with Fan from Boston and Chris Lavin. I'm just listing off people, but because my team is awesome. Anyway, we almost brought Targ to Gen Con. Out of our testing weekend, we came out thinking Targ is awesome. We ended up not loving the Targ mirror, among other things. We thought the Targ was weak to some other things in the Gen Con meta. I think we ended up being right to change. But the core of that deck that we built was the core of the deck that Sandy Barnabas went on a tear for the second half of 2017 with, where it's how he became world champion of Iowa. That's how he did a whole bunch of his success, was using the sort of core of the Targ deck we built originally for Gen Con to just roll face on both continents for the second half of 2017. So, and I was involved in helping test that deck. And I played a lot against Targaryen in testing for Jesse's Name Day tournament, and at Jesse's Name Day tournament where I went 2-1 against Targaryen and beating one of the best Targaryen players in North America, Jessica Thompson, twice, the only time I've beaten chess in tournaments, and losing to Tom, who ended up facing Jake in the finals. So I've got a lot of experience playing against Targ and playing with Targ in testing. I haven't taken Targ to a major tournament in a good long while, but I played a lot against in testing. And what Sandy said on Second Sons was that there's a carrying capacity for Targ, because Targ mirrors are nightmarish. They're high variance. They are just, in fact, if you really want to see this, go back to how nightmarish they are. Jesse Carpenter played Alejandro at Thrones War in a really miserable Targ mirror. It's just very much who draws what first. It's literally everything you hate about card games. And that means that a tournament, can only take so much Targ before it just becomes a variance fest of sort of who draws best, who's running hot that day, and that's it. And that's one of the reasons why I think Danny put Danny, the designer, put on Daenerys this effect: Daenerys Targaryen strength cannot be reduced by card effects, which would just make mirrors of this deck against each other just like even more nightmarish and variance heavy. So if you're afraid of beating of Targaryen and you want to beat Targaryen, play Targ for both, because since it's variance heavy, if you are very skillful, you should have more outs than a less skillful Targ player. And just, you might win coin flips. The luck could be hitting you really far. So if you're the number one strategy, if you want to beat Targaryen, is just play Targaryen. That's the number one strategy. That one's a little bit of a joke, but I still think it's important to understand. If you're really scared about Targ, just play Targ. And if your tournament didn't reach that carrying capacity, you're in good shape. If it did, well, hopefully your play and the coin flip gods are on your side. Now, a bit more serious, a bit more things you have control over is make them have it. Okay, this is something in testing that Dan Struhall, when I was coming up in Thrones, would always tell me, because back in 1.0, he and Dave Stromes were massive Targ players. And for second edition, like, Targaryen was a burn faction then. There were lots of burn effects as well. So lots of terminal effects that killed your characters. It lowered their strength to kill them. Or discard them, actually. Discard was maybe more common. Well, anyway, that's me getting to 1.0. What matters here is second edition. But anyway, Dan would always be like, I would just be so afraid. And when I've helped people prepare, like help my team prepare for Jesse's Name Day tourney, and just sort of generally when I've been working with newer players, or even just myself or my teammates in big competitive events like Gen Con or a Next event, we talk about just make them have it. Like, Targ is running 12 events, but it doesn't always going to have the Dracarys. It's not always going to have, just because it has Dany doesn't necessarily mean it has the Dragon is no slave. Now, oftentimes they do, and if they do, they do. But they also sometimes just don't. Like, if you just spend the rest of the game not doing anything, you are, unless you're truly playing, like, I don't know, a characterless Martell stack deck, or like the Lancer bounce deck, or something like that, that just, just doesn't need to do challenges even at all, or defend challenges at all, or a combo deck that's just waiting to come off. Like, if your deck has any strategy, whether it's a wall deck, a relatively defensive Bitterbridge deck, whatever, you need to do some challenges, or at least defend some challenges. And if you just spend the whole game being utterly afraid of Targaryen and afraid of their burn effects, you are going to lose. You've just already literally given the win to your opponent. And so what you need to do is now that doesn't just mean you should literally attack and defend every challenge. But you should think, particularly in the early turns, can I lose this character? Can I, is this character so integral to my strategy that I can't lose it? That it simply is indispensable? And honestly, honest to goodness, one of the things I've learned in the course of the 4 years I've been playing this game competitively, and what are we at? 3 years that this game, the second edition, has been around, is most characters, the answer to that question is yes, you can lose them. And being overly committed to particularly unique characters is a good way to lose games. Particularly against Targaryen, because they have the removal. So if you make them happen, particularly in the first turn, particularly if it requires 2 burn effects for them to get you, you really should make them have it. Even if they have 900 gold, which some Targ decks, it feels like, with this plot, trade routes, which gives them 2 gold base from the plot, but when revealed, gain 1 gold for each location you control and each location your opponent controls. And Targ, as you can see down here, loves locations, and many decks in the current meta love locations, so it's not hard for Targ to have 1,000,000 gold, or what feels like 1,000,000 gold. Make them have it. Just like, even if they have 1,000,000 gold, you gotta make them have it. Sometimes they do, and you lose, but sometimes they don't, and you win. So learning when that is, learning that those situations, and I would often say it's on the first turn is when you can take the biggest risks, is sort of a key to playing around Targaryen. So that's 2 general strategies. So those don't require any specific cards. One is sort of at the deck building level. Super afraid of Targaryen? Just play Targaryen. That will help bring that meta to the Sandy Barnabas line. The carrying, that's what I'm calling it now, the Barnabas line. That's the carrying capacity of Targ in any particular meta. So if you are helping bring your next tournament, by bringing Targ, you are helping your next tournament reach the Barnabas line. All right? You are set. You're in good spot. Just be prepared for those coin flips. Or make them have it, which is just simply coming to the point where understanding that more often than not, you can lose the character, you can take the risk. If this proactive play or this defensive play is the best play on the board and best play from your hand, you should just do it, particularly early on, because you got to make them have it. And sometimes they will, but sometimes they won't. And making them have it is asking questions of the Targ player then that they have to have the answers to. And, sometimes Targ can brick, particularly with these decks which are getting lower and lower in the character count because Danny encourages you to bring events. It's much easier for Targ to get some awkward draws. And you could be in pretty good shape if you force them turn after turn to have the burn, to have the ability to respond to the questions that you're answering. Because Targ probably has some of the strongest answers in the game, it can, and it may not always seem this way, it can often misspeak those answers. It can often not have them at the time in which they need them. So while they have lots of answers and they have really strong synergies, the way Targ decks are built at the current moment, they do have the opportunity to just brick out. And you should try to push them by constantly forcing them to have the answers, by asking really difficult questions for them in the form of challenges, lots of renown, and we'll get to sort of renown and taking the game long in a little bit. But just, it's really, really important that you force them to have the answer. So, but the next thing, the third one, is messing with the discard pile. And the best way to mess with someone's discard pile is Isle of Ravens. So, Targ really, 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 really hates when you mess with this discard pile. Probably not as much as Martell does, but Isle of Ravens, which has this action, kneel Isle of Ravens to choose a card in any player's discard pile and shuffle it into its owner's deck. This card you need to use to target, above all, Second Sons. Because Second Sons is in many ways one of the key engines by which Targaryen, but also fuels its ability to recover. Because you can run a Targ player out of resources, but the fact, they burned you, they always had it, but you've just been wearing them out. They're down to, they had to discard 2 cards to Quotho. They had to discard cards to Plaza of Pride to put that pressure on you or to keep up with your pressure. And they're down to 1, 2 cards in your hand. If they're running Consuming Flames, they're sometimes down to no cards in their hand. But Flea Bottom basically says, I will always have a 6 strength character every turn with military and power. So that means I can either win a military challenge, push through a military challenge, win a power challenge, or defend a power challenge every turn. All right, I'm always going to save that 1 gold. I'm always going to pull them out. Shuffling them back into the deck with Isle of Ravens gets around that. They get 1 use out of it, and you can just do it if they do some effect that puts it, they discard it to reserve 1 turn to start seeing a discard pile. Just start shuffling those things that into their deck. Particularly powerful is also hitting things like Storm Crows that they like to pull out, Ser Jorah Mormont, Dragons, Viscera, and Targ decks that are running even more, are running Breaking Ties, which Adam's version is not. And Breaking Ties, of course, lets you sacrifice a loyal character, return a non-loyal, character or attachment to your opponent's hand. That plot encourages even more discard use, so you see a lot of cheap loyal cards, not just Viscera, but also Eerie, I think, or Jiqui, one of the handmaidens. I apologize for not knowing that off the top of my head. One of the handmaidens that's loyal, shuffling them into the deck before they can be Breaking Ties, or before they get 1 hit, you shuffle it in, and they don't get that second hit with Breaking Ties, is really strong. This is a similar playstyle, and learning how to do this properly is also something that will pay dividends in other matchups, like Martell. So actually, Flea Bottom is a card that I was Isle of Ravens was a card that I was very sour on when it came out in There Is My Claim in the 2nd cycle. But Flea Bottom makes it a really good answer card. In fact, it's such a good answer card that it's in Adam's deck right here. It helps in the Targ Mirror, it helps against Martell, and you can also shuffle your Dracaris's and your Dragon is No Slaves into the deck to get those back. And so, just in any faction, including Isle of Ravens, has uses now, because there's at least 2, really 3 factions that you can shuffle really powerful cards into their deck from the discard pile. And that's Targ, Martell, which Shadow City Bastard, million different Targ tricks that are not Targ tricks, Martell tricks that are in there. Like Martell, even more than Targaryen, uses the discard pile as a second hand. And then of course Tyrell, which has a variety of ambush effects that often end up in the discard pile because Tyrell is often drawing so many cards. It's chucking the ambush characters into the discard pile for taxation and then just bringing them out with Flea Bottom so that you are just constantly continuing this card synergy. And you shut that down. So say goodbye to informants, say goodbye to spies, say goodbye to all these things thanks to Isle of Ravens. So Isle of Ravens is just actually in the meta right now, just a generally good card. Now, it's not a 3x card, it's a 1 of. But it is a really strong answer to Targaryen, and it's a really strong answer to a variety of other decks in the meta. So slotting one of those in right now is a really good bet. So we've got Play Targ, we've got Make Them Have It, and we're now screwing around with their discard pile. Oh, another way to screw with their discard pile that's a bit more faction specific is the Night's Watch events, particularly what is the 2-cost one? It is Now My Watch Begins, I believe. That steals 3-cost characters. That's really good. Yoren stealing 3-cost characters is really good. There's just anything that messes with the discard pile like that is really powerful against Targaryen. Because if they discard most of their hand to power their effects, and they expect to be able to pull that card advantage out of their discard pile with Flea Bottom, and you whack that, you are in good shape. And of course, Isle of Ravens is not vulnerable to Viscera, because it's an attachment. It's a location. It can't be killed by that. And Targ doesn't have a lot of native location control, which is why originally Adam's version was running JC Drummond and over these Plazas of Prides, but I put the Plaza of Prides in to sort of give viewers, listeners, readers a better sense of how traditional Targ decks play. But JC Drummond is a good card in Targaryen, again, to sort of hit things like Isle of Ravens. But Isle of Ravens is a good bet. Now, the other general strategy, and before we do that, is Barring the Gates. Barring the Gates is also really good against Targaryen because it turns off the Flea Bomb shenanigans. So this is another way to mess with their discard pile. So this, again, super strong as well in other matchups, particularly against Tyrell, particularly against Martell. But Barring the Gates is also really good against Targ. It can give you a turn where their Second Sons is not coming back, their Stormcrows is not coming back, their Handmaidens aren't coming back. And I don't mean Handmaiden, the Corset card. I mean one of the 3 Handmaidens that they can pull out of this card, the 2-cost Handmaidens. This says, hey, sorry, that's not happening this turn. And if they're running Quaith of the Shadow, a really good ambush card that Targaryen has, Missandei is turned off. Missandei here, who's also really powerful because of her interrupt. When Missandei is discarded from your hand or deck, place her into play instead of placing her in your discard pile. Sorry, Barring the Gates says no. So Barring the Gates is really, really strong against Targaryen as well. And there's a way to screw with their discard pile. It stops them from using the discard pile as their second hand. Now, what I was going to transition to originally before I noticed that I had Barring up was good positive attachments. And the ultimate example is faction specific, but is really, really strong and is an example of it. And I'll talk about another example of it when we get to the deck I'm going to recommend. But Dragonglass Dagger is sort of the platonic ideal of what I mean by good positive attachments. Like just running, I don't know, Little Birds, Appointeds, what's some other, I don't know, things you see, Noble Lineages. Just running attachments to beat Targaryen is a way to make your deck worse. What you want to do is look at what your faction has that gives you some advantages besides just against Targaryen, or it gives you additional upside against Targaryen. And the platonic ideal of this is Dragonglass Dagger, all right, which is a Night's Watch character only. While attached characters participating in a challenge, it gets +2 strength and is immune to opponent's character abilities. Okay, and let's all remember, Intimidate is a character ability, but actually this immune to opponent's character abilities was always sweet against Targaryen, but is even more sweet now, because that means that this attached character cannot get hit by Dany's effects while it's in a challenge, which is super duper strong. So this card gives Night's Watch decks a strong out against Targaryen. In fact, it's one of the reasons why Night's Watch reigns for a long time, at least until Breaking Ties, was a really good answer to Targaryen. It's less these days thanks to Breaking Ties, but it is still very strong in a general sense. If Breaking Ties was restricted or banned, or you're playing for some reason in a meta without the Martell box, it's a very strong answer to Targaryen. It's one of the reasons why we played Dan and John and I played Night's Watch Reigns of Castamere at Gen Con last year, was because of this card and because of its strong matchup against Targaryen. Particularly since Targ has gotten even more inner challenge effects. So that means it has gotten Astapor, it's gotten Consuming Flames, it's gotten a whole variety of things. It, over the course of this, besides Dany as well, and Stormcrows, like, you can't Stormcrows you in the middle of a challenge. Now, of course, if they get Dracarys, the +2 strength goes away and then they die, but it often, for a defense deck, this card was really good because it guaranteed the defense on that turn, prevented a whole bunch of shenanigans. That +2 strength is clutch. There are other cards and other factions that are like this, and we'll talk specifically about the Tyrell ones when we get to the deck that I'm going to recommend, which, spoiler alert, is a Tyrell deck. But positive attachments like this that give you some other kind of benefit that aren't necessarily dead cards in other matchups. So Bodyguard is a great example of just a generally good attachment because it provides saves to some of your crucial characters that you can slot in. The King attachment for your faction, so that is another option. The Cudgel for Drown God players is a great option, but because also it prevents them from Dragon is no slaving your characters. So your Mace with a Bodyguard, your Marjorie with a Bodyguard, your Balon with the Greyjoy King attachment, King of Salt and Rock, I believe is what the card is called, can't be hit by Dragon is no Slave, which significantly lowers the ability of Targ to blow you out with their, or burn you down with their burn spells, burn events. So we are really in a good place with these kind of attachments. Now, you shouldn't go overboard. You shouldn't be running 9 of them. But things like this, Ice in Stark, is just really fantastic against Targaryen. But the key thing that I want to emphasize is good attachments. Good attachments. See the stars? Good attachments. Okay. And then the final piece of advice that I have is take the game long. Well, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that Targaryen is not really the best faction about gaining power quickly or gaining power passively or gaining power in bursts. Targ kind of wants to wear you out of threats, and if you prepare your game plan, no matter what your deck is, your game plan to sort of space out your threats, to create redundancy for your threats, or to gain power passively over a long period of time, like through the Wall, or through Chamber and Chair, or through Old Town, or through some god-awful combination of all 3, or just 2 out of the 3, or through Mace, like cards that and strategies that stretch the game out, that devalue the value of either A, in particular characters, or B, the challenges phase, are really strong against Targaryen, because Targaryen does not have a lot of access of interaction around that. Like the Boneway is really strong against Targaryen. Same and other Martell sort of passive power tricks like that. So decks that are strong against that are like Bitter Bridge, which can gain power relatively passively. The Wall has been for a long time, particularly Builders, has been a pretty positive matchup for Targaryen. It can be a little brutal with the new Dany, but it definitely has had in the past some advantages. And then of course Martell Stag, Baratheon Chamber and Chair. Now these decks your deck is vulnerable to that first strategy of sort of blow you out. So Targ's out in those strategies is blow you out. If they can blow you out with that early Crown of Gold on your Melisandre, that Crown of Gold on your Jon Snow, that Crown of Gold on the key character on the Mace, and then into Blood of the Dragon, that just really, really just could blow you out, and you're just done. But if you can survive that initial pressure for Targ doesn't have a lot of answers to those location-based passive power strategies. Or defensive renown, like if you just defend Targ Targ's the challenges. You don't do a lot of aggressive challenges. You just sort of defend, 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 but have renown on some of those characters. And if you can spread the power out against Targaryen, and we'll get to that in a little bit, they can hit. Okay, you got the one character with 9 power. I'll just do everything I can to get it. Well, I've also got 2 power on my Knight of Flowers. I've got 2 power on my Big Marge. I've got 2 power here. Like a spread of threats is really good against Targaryen. So taking the game long, forcing Targ into a position where it can't really execute its 2 key strategies, blow you out, burn you to the ground, or burn you out, you're going to be in good shape. So first thing, if you can't beat them, join them. If you can't join them, beat them. No, if you can't beat them, join them. Make them have it. Screw with their discard pile. Good positive attachments, and take the game long. Those are sort of 4 general strategies that I would say people should use to beat Targ. Now, what's a deck that combines at least three of the 4 strategies of that? Well, that deck is this one, which was done by, I believe, this deck came in the top 16 at Zaragoza I think at this point, the time this video airs, a couple months ago, or maybe just a month ago. It did very well in Swiss. It lost in top 16 to a Targ deck, so I'm being honest about the data here. But I've played with this deck a lot recently, and I've actually found a lot of really positive matchups with Targ. So sometimes variance happens, but I think overall, this deck, which I believe was created by a man named Christian, but Lannister is his Iron Throne name, he built this deck of Tyrell, Kings of Summer. I think this deck is super strong against Targaryen. It follows a lot of the 4 things that I've laid out here. It can take the game long. It can mess with your opponent's discard pile. It has good positive attachments, and it will make them have it. So how does this deck work? Well, this deck is a Mace deck. So you have a variety of different wins. You can sometimes just win with your renowned bodies. Your Marjorie Tyrell, your Knight of Flowers, your Knight of Summer, your Brienne's, and where's Renly? Renly, Randall, all the traditional Tyrell big bodies. Oh, Garth. It's easy to forget. I've forgotten Garth the Gross. I've been playing a ton of Tyrell. Garth the Gross, all these renowned bodies that can just win challenges and win that way. All right, you've got that. That's victory condition number 1. Victory condition number 2 is passive power. Now, passive power can be done through Old Town, which is really, really strong. One of my favorite cards in the entire game is Kneel Old Town, name a card type, character, location, attachment, or event, then reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed card has that card type, draw it and gain 1 power for your faction. So this means that you can, and there's 33 characters, 21 locations, a couple of events, and a couple of attachments. But most of the time you're going to say character, or location, usually character. And that means you can gain 1 power and draw a card. It's particularly good to trigger this in taxation, because that way if you have to discard down to your reserve, you can then just draw a card, and you're going into the next round seeing 3 cards instead of 2. 3 instead of 2. And there's some powerful, powerful effects here that can also protect you from Targ's strategies. There's Hand's Judgment. There's Renly's Pavilion. Hand's Judgment, of course, is the cost X cancel that cancels an event where X is that event's printed cost. There's Renly's Pavilion, which choose a character. One of those characters gets -1 strength, and the other gets +1 strength, which gives you protection from Dany's little chipping away at your strength. It's really good on Blood of the Dragon turn. You can sometimes use it to kill your opponent's character and save your character. It's just generally a really good card against Targaryen. There's, of course, Hornhill, which is super great against Targaryen, particularly if you're heavy in the Renown. Bestow 3 challenges action, Kneel Hornhill, to give let's remember this, when I first read this card, I did not read each participating Tyrell character you control +X strength until end of the challenge. X is the number of gold Hornhill has. So this can just cancel out an Astapor. This can cancel out a Dracarys. This can cancel. Of course, the characters will die afterwards, but sometimes Hornhill is your closer with the Renown of Randall with the renown of Renly. If you can get 3 renowned bodies into a power challenge, you know, this Hill guarantees you're going to win that power challenge and net yourself 4 to 5 power. Like, it's really strong against Targaryen. But then, of course, oh, and also Marjorie. Marjorie is, with her reaction, after unique, this is why she's called Tinder Marge. After unique Lord or Lady character you control is killed, search your deck for a unique King or Lord character and put it into play. Shuffle your deck. This Marjorie is super strong against Targaryen because they're going to kill your small lords like Garth the Gross, which is why he's only running, this deck's only running 1. Your Garland, your Renly, who is going to die if they have Beggar King out. You know, this Varys, which we'll get to Varys in a second. Knight of Flowers, these guys die, you then bring another threat out. It's a great way to get Mace out with a trick. And Mace is the deck's other, or before I move on to Mace, actually, I want to talk about Varys. Varys is also a really good card against Targaryen because it can clear off their dupes and set up your Valor Morghulis, or make their Valor Morghulis a lot less attractive. When I've been playing Tyrell decks like this against Targaryen, they kill Paxter with Burn, or I kill Paxter with Military Claim. I Marjorie out Varys, who has this interrupt. When the dominance phase ends, remove Varys from the game to discard each character from play, is super strong. They do not like losing their dupes on their Drogo, their Dany's. Like, having those characters duped and sticking around is really important to a lot of Targ strategies currently, and taking them out and then going into your Valor is super powerful because you can just discard away your own Marjorie, she's safe, and then you Valor away the rest of their cards. It's super strong. So, like, first turn Marjorie into Varys, get rid of their early advantage, can totally screw up Targ's first primary strategy of blow them out, because you've now blown them out because they have to start from fresh. And you can go into, one of the things I like about this deck in a Targ heavy meta is go into a trade routes, which rewards you. Look at all these 21 locations. Let's go back to our deck, which running 14 locations. So both sides are going to have a ton of locations in play, and you're going to be able to stop them. So, oh, and this is also running Isle of Ravens as another answer to Targ. So, the other win condition of this deck is, of course, this gentleman. Mace Tyrell. Yeah, Mace. So he's a 7 cost, 5 strength, intrigue, power. By con, he has the reaction after a Tyrell character enters play under your control. Pay 1 gold to have Mace Tyrell gain 1 power. Limit once per phase. Action, kneel your faction card to remove another Tyrell character you control from the game until the beginning of the next phase. Alright, so many things you can do with this guy. This guy is the deck's main win condition. 1, Mace is not easily burnable. Dany makes it easier. Now, Mace used to be just like an auto win against Targaryen in many cases if you could get your Mace to stick to escape your opponent's Valor Morghulis when they were playing Targ, because you just simply never put Mace in challenges. Just against Targaryen, you just simply never put him in challenges. But now, thanks to Dany and the return of Dragon is no Slave to the meta as like a consistent card that all Targ decks are running, and now that's a 3 strength burn, plays like you know, Dragon is no slaving him twice, or Dragon is no slaving him, then burning somebody else. So Dragon is no slave, -3. Dracarys something else, -4. On a Blood of the Dragon turn, he dies. Or crowning him on turn 2, and then Blood of the Dragon on turn 3, he dies, because he is only 5 strength. But, you know, that there's many more outs that Targaryen has to him than they once did, but there's some answers in this deck. The first is the hand's judgment to obviously cancel. Now, they still get the -1, but they don't get the -2 if you cancel the Dragon is no Slave, and you should have enough gold to do that because you've got trade routes, Time of Plenty, Late Summer Feast, Compelled by the Faith, and Close Call all have high gold. And we'll talk about Compelled by the Faith in a second. All right, Bodyguard. Bodyguard turns off Dragon is no Slave on your Mace, which basically means he is generally safe, except from Crown of Gold into Blood of the Dragon. Now, if you're afraid of Blood of the they crown your dude, crown your Mace, then go into Blood of the Dragon, you should go into Compelled by the Faith, which is a new plot which has, when revealed, move each power from each card in play to its controller's faction card. Blood of the Dragon has 2 initiative. Oh wait, that doesn't work. Timing. He dies before. No, my brilliant play. So in the middle of the video, you get to do, because he dies before. This is an important thing to remember. Blood of the Dragon takes place immediately before any when revealed effects happen. And Compelled by the Faith is a when revealed. So that doesn't quite work as well as I wanted to. Darn it. But it's still really good if you can move your power from Mace onto your faction card, where it's generally safer against Targaryen. So this is still a very useful plot against Targaryen. See, we get live. I did it live. I figured it out live. And it's always something that I forget in the rules while I'm actually playing, which is that Blood of the Dragon, it's important to remember, one of the reasons why Targ is so good is that Blood of the Dragon takes place immediately before any when revealed effects. So, besides my mistake, let's go back into how this deck functions as an answer to Targaryen. So, we have Mace. So, Mace can also let you pop characters that have been partially burned out so they don't get killed. It is also the kind of passive win condition that I was talking about before, where Targ has some forms of interaction with Mace, but not a huge number of them. And so you can gain power really, 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 really fast. All right? Really, really, really fast. And Targ can't deal with it. If Targ can't find that answer to Mace, particularly if you put a bodyguard on him, you are set and you will win. Because again, the access of interaction for this passive power is really, 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 really difficult for Targaryen. So this deck is even also running an Iron Throne, which means you're consistently winning dominance, which again is putting a clock on Targaryen that they have trouble handling it. The synergy between Mace, Old Town, and the Iron Throne here really just puts a clock on the Targaryen deck, particularly if you can get a bodyguard on Mace. The last trick, it's not really a trick, but the last really important way to sort of deal with Targaryen here is Hightower Spy, which is a brand new Tyrell card, which is House Hightower Spy, Ambush 3 reaction. After Hightower Spy enters play, choose a character and reveal the top card of your deck until the end of the phase. That character gets plus X strength. X is the printing cost of the revealed card. All right, so this is super good against Targaryen. So you have to defend with your Mace, or they do some shenanigans to your Mace. You know you have, say, 6 power in your Mace, and you know through Renown you can get to 15 that turn. You just need to make sure that Mace doesn't die by the end of the challenges phase. Hightower Spy helps you. Okay? You can also, to get around Blood of the Dragon, you can also blink her out at the end of taxation with Mace's ability, because again, read Mace's ability. You can go after a Tyrell character enters, no, excuse me, the other one. Action, kneel your faction card to remove another Tyrell character you control from the game until the beginning of the next phase. You remove the Hightower Spy, because her reaction is when she enters play at the in the taxation phase. She comes out in the beginning of the plot phase before you revealed any new plots, and that lets you flip into Compelled by the Faith, because whatever you pump Mace with is going, that will be until the end of the phase, so you can move the power safely onto your house card. Mace may die in the draw phase, but you can then go into close call to bring him back in the future. So that's just one kind of play that does interact with the correct rules of Blood of the Dragon. So hopefully I made myself up after that mistake with Blood of the Dragon timing. Always tricky. But there's lots of really cool plays you can do that with Mace and the Hightower Spy, because the Hightower Spy also has synergy with Old Town, because you know what the top card of your deck is, and unless you're super forgetful, like me sometimes, you will know that your Old Town is guaranteed to hit. So that's 1 power, plus this to push through a challenge to protect your character from burn, so which is why it was called Spy Mace by the deck creator. So again, I really think this Tyrell summer deck, and I haven't even gone into all of the various synergies that this deck has. I haven't even talked about Hightower, but I mean, most people with its reaction after a Tyrell character enters play under your control, gain 1 gold and draw 1 card. Like, most players should know now. That's really good. Anyway, this, I think, really helps you beat Targaryen. This deck has well, it's not playing Targ, but it does have a make them have it, because you've got a lot of renowned characters that you can push out early and force them to have their burn. Draw out the early burn on characters like Knight of Flowers, Garland, even Renly, even Marjorie, or the synergy between forcing them to have it by throwing a juicy target like a Knight of Flowers, which you can then replace with a Mace or replace with a Varys, forcing them to have it early, and then you are able to knock it out, because their threats are gone now, but you still have just a deck full of threats, deck full of renown. Like, make it so this deck makes them have it. It screws their discard pile. It's running Isle of Ravens to shuffle things in. And then it's got good positive attachments in the form of Bodyguard, and it is super capable of taking the game long. This deck should, if it can stretch out a game against Targaryen, generally win. If the Targ burn them all or blow them out strategy does not work against this deck, I would say it wins almost every time. I played a lot of Tyrell over the course of 2018, and that's generally, this deck really does that strategy that I was talking about earlier, which is sort of stretch the game on, create passive power, and or defensive renown to sort of just prevent the Targ player from executing their two primary strategies, blowing you out and burning you down. So I hope that this video was pretty informative with y'all about how to play Targ, how to beat Targ, and that this deck, which I really do think is one of the best answers to Targaryen in the future, or in the present, really helps you in the future with your games. So if everyone brings Targ to answer combo, you can bring this. This is level 3 thought to beat Targaryen. Yeah, so please leave comments down below if you liked this video, what you thought was good, what you thought was bad, what could be improved, any suggestions for future videos. I'd like to do this more often. I'm considering maybe doing one on non-combo Tyrell decks, either this or maybe Bitterbridge or something like that, which I have a huge amount of experience with, of sort of how to beat that deck. But I also think other suggestions, other factions, other archetypes, general suggestions for this video series. So please leave those in the comments or on the Facebook group, or you can message me. I don't know. I'm very reachable. So anyway, thank you all for watching, listening, and reading.